Welcome to Family Basics 101. I'm Dr. Bruce McClure, the local minister at the Prince George's Church of Christ, located at 7800 Central Avenue in Landover, Maryland. Throughout the week, we focused on domestic violence. This is actually Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And we dedicated the first 2 weeks, last week and this week, focusing on a very, very sensitive, yet a very serious topic of domestic violence. On yesterday, we began to talk about the Stockholm syndrome and how individuals that are being abused are somehow drawn into a strange alliance with the abuser. And the question was raised, why is this so? On yesterday, we introduced the Stockholm Syndrome, and today I want to continue developing it. We stopped with this particular slide on yesterday just to explain the Stockholm Syndrome. The victims develop positive feelings toward the person holding them captive or abusing them. The victim develops negative feelings toward the people who want to rescue them, the police, authority figures, or anyone who might be trying to help them get away from their captors, that family and loved ones. And then the victim begins to perceive their captors uh, as the people that, well, they are part of humanity, and they believe and they have the same goals and they have the same values as I do. In other words, we've got something in common. And with the Stockholm syndrome, individuals will create a very unhealthy alliance with their captors. So today, I want us to focus on broadening a clarity of what this is all about. When people are taken hostage, be it in a kidnapping, a bank robbery, a marriage, yes, people are taken hostage in marriages. People are held hostage at work. People are held hostage politically, and people are even held hostage in religious environments. The sense of being helpless are basically the same. It doesn't matter the environment. There's an undergirding sense of I am trapped and I've got to survive. The challenge for those in such situations is very simple. It's very, very fun. How do I survive the environment in which I am reliant upon my captors? Now, look at bullet number one, and you'll understand this. In kidnapping, how do I survive the environment when my very life depends on my kidnappers? In a bank robbery, how do I survive this environment when my very existence depends on the person with the gun? In a marriage, how do I survive this environment if the person I'm married to controls the finances? The person I'm married to threatens to take everything if I choose to leave. The person decides whether or not I live or I die. Uh, there was a situation back in the early 2000s, if I'm not mistaken, around 2003, where in California, an entire family was killed because it was a domestic violence situation. Uh, and it was in a marriage, but it was also in a religious environment because the family that was killed were affiliated with the churches of Christ. They had been to church that morning. And the abuser killed his mother-in-law, his wife, and 3 children. That was in a marriage, that was in a religious environment. So there's a sense of helplessness. And the challenge for those that are in that environment is simply, how do I survive when my very existence depends upon my captors? Now, showing the slightest amount of kindness is seen by the abused as compassion. They allowed me to use the toilet. See, they can't be too bad. He or she allowed me to get a drink of water. Therefore, my abuser isn't such a bad person. These are just basic fundamental needs of life. But when a person is in that abusive, violent potential situation, they will misinterpret those basic things like using the toilet or getting a drink of water with equating that to saying, this person is just like me. They're just having really amazing how life is translated. Uh, when we talk about the Stockholm syndrome, uh, we need to look at what goes on today as well. It's no different today. There are abusive relationships, sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, incest exists in all of these following areas. Uh, Political people in power right now are abusers. Business people who are popular right now are abusers. Sport team owners who are known right now are abusers. Entertainers who are popular right now are abusers. Mega church leaders who are known right now are abusers. And the people that are under them, that are dependent upon them, many of them have the Stockholm syndrome. Look at our politics today. What draws people to these type people? Look at business people. What draws people to those type people in sports? Look at the scandal that just took place with the young ladies, with the Olympics, in the gymnastics. College baseball. Look at what happened with one of the political figures from Ohio who was enabling the chaos of a major wrestling program at a major university. What causes people to be drawn toward these type individuals? Look at the Catholic Church and all of the sexual abuse that historically has gone on throughout the years. And yet the leaders in those churches were basically tolerated. Why are people drawn into this Stockholm syndrome? Well, it's a way to cope with pain due to abuse or the fear of potentially being abused. If I can get ahead of the abuse, then I won't be abused. Fear and terror are strong motivating incentives to avoid feeling powerless and worthless. The abuser gets to be the approval tool for the abused. So, in the mind of the individual who's getting into the mentality of the Stockholm syndrome, they're saying, I can get into the head of my abuser and figure out what pleases my abuser. And if I can stay ahead of the abuser, I can also stay ahead of being abused. So my fear and my terror of what could happen based on what I've seen happen with others is the incentive that is driving me to acquiesce, to surrender, to cater to whatever the abuser might want. So, bullying is very intimidating, and some try avoiding or minimizing the impact of that bullying at all costs. Now, I'm using bullying as a synonymous term with abuser. It's no different. So, what do people normally, or how do people behave with bullies? They laugh with them. Well, they laugh with the abuser when it's not funny. They cater to them. Well, they cater to abusers when they know they should not be. But it's a way of avoiding feeling powerless and worthless. They act out with the abuser. Have you ever noticed bullies have kind of like little flunkies around them? Bullies surround themselves with zeros. And the bully is made to feel important by those who he or she has surrounded themselves with. And those whom are surrounding the bully began to think like the bully. If I behave this way, if I say this crazy thing, then the bully is going to see that I'm on his or her side. And if they see that I'm on their side, then they won't abuse me. Abuse is abuse. And what the bully consistently is doing is abusing by intimidation. The abused is really abusing themselves in aspiration that they will not be abused by the abuser. That reminds me of a teacher I had in fifth grade. She would punish you, but sometimes she would punish you by making you punish yourself. Now, this was during the era when corporal punishment was still in the public school system. And the teacher would have a strap or a little switch, and you had to hold out your hand, and the teacher would hit you in your hand. They wouldn't kill you, but they'd hit you in your hand. But this particular fifth grade teacher would make you whip yourself. It was laughable. But in order for you to have a little bit of control over how intense you would punish yourself, the teacher would allow you to punish yourself. Well, you had to do a little bit because the threat was, if you don't punish yourself adequately, I'll do it for you. Well, the abused would rather take a chance on punishing themselves than allowing the abuser to do it. Abusing others, or the abuser of others, just like their abuser does the abuse of others just like the abuser does them in order to gain the approval of the abuser and to send a message to others that the abuser is protecting them. Now, what I was intended to say on this, and I didn't type it right, is sometimes the abused will abuse other people in order to say to the abuser, approve of me. And if you approve of how I'm mistreating others, then I'm afraid that if I don't send that message of abusing others, that you're going to turn around and abuse me. So the message is, I'd rather abuse somebody else than for the abuser to abuse me. Now, I want you to think about that in politics. We are living in a time right now, and I'm going to rewrite that last bullet. It got a little bit worded and disconnected, but I'll rewrite that. But we're living in a time right now where there are literally tens of thousands of people that would rather abuse other people rather than to be abused by the real bully in the room. And the crazy thing is, the bully is no longer in the room. And yet people were abused so harshly, and they saw how intense that bully could be, that even though the bully is out of the room, people are still afraid that the bully will come get me. People were traumatized by the intensity of how the bully bullied. That's the way it works in domestic violence. How do you handle an abuser? How do you handle a bully? You resist with everything in you. You should not be intimidated. You say, but you don't understand how mean and how cruel and how harsh and how punitive this person is. Oh, yeah, we do. The only fight that I ever lost growing up was the one where I didn't fight. I live with that to this day. I did not resist with everything that was in me. I allowed myself to be intimidated by the bully. And I regret that to this day. Always remember, abusers are broken people. They're broken. Always remember, abusers are cowards. They are afraid of being found out in terms of what's broken inside of them. So you've got to handle them just like they are. They're broken. So you resist them. They're already broken. So you're not going to allow them to break you. They are already intimidated, so you do not allow them to intimidate you. In the book of James, chapter 4, verse number 7, the brother of Jesus put it this way: you submit yourselves to God, but you resist the devil. Well, move that term and put abuser. Move that word devil and put bully. Resist the devil, and what will he do? This is from God's son. This is from Jesus's brother. He says, if you resist, he will flee from you because he know you're going to fight back. I don't know what to do. Resist. I'm afraid. Well, look at 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7. For God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and a sound mind. We are operating under the power of God. If God has the power to speak a word and this world comes into existence, that's the power we're working under. That power does not give space for intimidation, and it does not give space for fear. We can still be loving people. Well, but I've got to act like a Christian. You can act like a Christian, but you can still take care of business. You can still resist with everything in you. You're not a doormat because you're a Christian. You can act out of love and still not allow anyone like a bully or an abuser to intimidate you. Even in the midst of the bullying, the intimidation attempts, you're never supposed to allow that to rattle your mind. Be of a sound mind. Never allow the noise of an abuser to pull you out of who you are. Always stay inside of who you are. You never allow an abuser to rattle you in such a way that you lose control of who you are. Because once you lose control, guess who you've given control to? The abuser. Resist with everything in you. Do not be intimidated. And always remember that abusers are broken. And always remember that abusers are cowards. They are afraid of the world. And they are going around blowing smoke everywhere they go, trying to show strength. We lived with that for 4 years under a president that was an absolute abusive person, still is. A bully, still is. But look at how people are so intimidated by that bully that now they're acting out. Well, why are they acting out? In order to keep the bully from abusing them. And that's true in every walk of life. When the abuser takes charge, then people, no matter what relational encounter they're in, they will surrender. They're politicians. I've just outlined the most recent one. But they're a business. Well, if I don't do what that bully says, and if I don't do what that abuser says, I'm going to lose my job. That's probably true. You might lose your job. But you have made a statement. You will not be intimidated. You will not surrender your integrity because of a bully or an abuser. Look at what the Olympic team did. Those young ladies, it took courage for them. They could have lost all, but they said, we don't care. We're tired of this. In the entertainment field, this guy, R. Kelly, look at all of the women who spoke up and with the arrogancy. He's just sat there in court. But there were other people who had been victimized by him that came to his defense. Well, why? Because they had the Stockholm syndrome. It happens in every sphere of life, but there are some people who have made the decision that we are going to resist because what we know is at least that person will flee from me. I wish everybody would resist them. I hope as we move through this Domestic Violence Awareness Month that this series of lessons have been beneficial, uh, if not for you personally, for somebody you know. I've got another obligation tomorrow, so I will not air Family Basics 101 at this time on tomorrow. And that's why I've gone a little bit longer today. But again, please share these lessons with people at appropriate times because you may be the lifeline they need in order to know better how to cope with domestic abusers. I'll see you back in class again Monday. Don't be late and don't skip class.